Hey everyone, this is Manly Badass Hero and welcome to Crimson Grey, Dusk and Dawn. Crimson Grey, Dusk and Dawn is the sequel to Crimson Grey, a visual novel about a Yandere couple having a nice relationship where nothing goes wrong ever. The melancholy melody echoed within her, and Lizzie clung to it. There was a time when the melody hadn't been with her, though she preferred not to think about that time. That was before she met him, Manly Badass Hero. The melody was sad, but it was his, so she loved it, and it was certainly better than emptiness. Lizzie had expected that meeting her special person would change everything, and it had, but to her surprise it hadn't happened all at once. Instead they both grew and changed, their life together becoming even more wonderful and her mind growing to encompass it. Yet she had a difficult time pinpointing exactly when she had first heard the melody. It would have been romantic if it had appeared at some momentous occasion, such as when she met him, or when they first made love, or on some future day, when they were finally married. But instead it had slowly emerged, whispering at the edges of her mind. Smiling to herself, Lizzie began to contemplate the beginnings of the melody more firmly. But that moment her world was disrupted by two people approaching her. Two normal folks. By the way, this storyline is from the perspective of Lizzie, or Yandere for the previous game, so it's a little bit inverted as far as perspective. Her eyes flickered over their substanceless bodies, analyzing everything about them. She distantly knew the girl's name, had only seen the boy on several occasions. Both sophomores like John and her. Are we in college? No physical threat. Lizzie had seen the two of them holding hands on campus green, and from pupil dilation judged them to be a couple, so unlikely to be a threat to her relationship. Better kill them anyways, but now that they've been approaching her, she put on her usual smile and considered them more carefully. The boy was normal enough, but the girl, she was rather pretty, and she dressed fairly well. It would take so little for her to try to show off what she had. Was that a teasing glint in her eye? This is Lizzie vision. Lizzie's smile widened just a bit, and she reclassified the girl as a minor threat. Hey, sorry to interrupt. It's Lizzie, right? That's right. Nice to meet you. She responded politely as they introduced themselves, only tracking information for future reference. Once putting on a friendly mask had been difficult for her, an imitation of something she'd only observed. Now she could fake it more easily, mirroring real emotions she had when she was with him. It irritated her to waste her smiles on random people who didn't matter, though. So as soon as possible, Lizzie encouraged him to get to the point. We're trying to start a social thing for other couples on campus? That sounds awful. They may be about the same age, but hanging out with a single college kid just isn't the same, you know? We don't have many people yet, so if you have any ideas, we're open to them. Either of you, your husband's name is John, right? We married? Why did she know his name? Lizzie's smile became brittle as she stared over the girl again, searching for the slightest tick that might give her away. She had played it off like she wasn't sure about his name, but she knew. Lizzie was sure of it. Perhaps her analysis of their threat was wrong. She had dismissed them as a couple, but neglected to consider how impure most love was. The girl might ignore her partner and target John. Wolf. Or they could be one of those sexually adventurous couples she'd read about, prowling for other couples. Lizzie had not given a single real thought to the subject until that moment, when bloody hatred clawed itself out of her soul. Just as she was about to let those emotions leak out into her face, Lizzie heard the melody again over the beating of her heart. Sad, but calm. She wasn't sure what John would say to her, but the thought of him soothed the growing rage. It was also possible that the girl hadn't wanted to seem too forward, like they had been tracking them, checking their faces more carefully. Lizzie saw hints of nervousness and forced casualness. She set aside her main concern, flagging as a potential problem for future consideration. Only a tiny fraction of a second had passed. Lizzie gave them both an apologetic smile. That's very kind of you, but it's hard for us to have much of a social life. We're trying to get our degrees quickly. Oh, that's a shame. The offer's still open, though. Let your husband know, okay? Okay. I'll murder you in your sleep. I'm a Terminator, you know. With that, Lizzie brushed past him as quickly as she could without seeming rude. Despite the potential threat and new sorts of danger to consider, she also felt a little warm. People thought they were married. They were often together on campus, but Lizzie had thought she'd retain the majority of her affection for when they were alone. The warmth drained away slowly as Lizzie went about her business, though. They still weren't married. John was willing to tie the knot, but the thought had made her heart leap into her chest. It had nothing to do with the idea of being with him. Lizzie berated herself for the very thought, and everything to do with how she was sure the wedding would draw bad luck to them somehow. At first, she hadn't wanted to get married because she was afraid that the official record would draw a court take down on them somehow. But over 2 years had passed since the violent incident, and it was clear that they had escaped. Enrolling in college hadn't drawn any negative attention either, so it was safe for them to get married. And yet, something would go wrong. Even if they didn't invite anyone, she was sure that someone would ruin their day. And while no one could possibly ruin their relationship, she would only have one wedding day and she wanted to be perfect. Suddenly the people around her were too many. Faceless, soulless creatures, moving past her indifferently. The drone of their voices drowned out the melody. Stopping in place, Lizzie frowned, struggling to regain it. But his melody had drifted out of her mind, and no amount of thinking about the joy she felt with him would bring it back. Checking the time, Lizzie decided she had enough before she needed to get to class. Normally she preferred to arrive early, but that was no longer a priority. The gentle buzz of class, which she usually found passable, if a pale second to being with him, would now only disrupt her. It was difficult to hold herself back, but Lizzie managed to sprint across campus no faster than an ordinary runner. This wasn't the first time, and someone from the track team had actually tried to recruit her. That was unacceptable. The track uniforms weren't flattering, but everyone would be wearing them. Of course, he would come out to events to be supportive, but that meant his eyes would be assaulted by the entire female track team. That could not be allowed. I just have to kill them all. It's actually an option there. Maybe we should choose that, who knows? Or maybe we should make a save point first. Okay, so the mouse pointer. I thought something was happening to my mouse. You don't see it, because, you know, the mouse cursor is invisible, but it's moving on its own. And that's no good. I legitimately thought my optic mouse was having an error, because that happens, you know, you get a little hair in there. So I started cleaning it. But no, the mouse just really wants me to kill the track team. Well, you know, can't say no. The mouse has decided. She actually took a step toward them, hand moving to a weapon. But no, she didn't need to do that anymore. But for a moment she had wanted to, fully intended to. Lizzie had to take a deep breath and focus to turn away from that choice. The hollowness within her grew and grew as she left campus. Fortunately, their little apartment was nearby. A split home provided as housing for couples. It had taken serious work to obtain one despite not being married, as the fools and admissions thought there was a chance she and John might break up. That's right, me and John would never break up. That's crazy. Since it was 2:52, John was likely to be reading for a class. He had referenced a paper being due soon, but he never went down to the computer lab until she was in class. After all, he knew that she might need him. His consideration made a warm glow spread through Lizzie, but that wasn't enough. She needed to see him. She had her key in hand as she approached the door, but it was already unlocked, almost as if he had known. Lizzie threw it open and rushed inside. Hey, I didn't murder the track team yet, are you proud of me? John sat on the couch, reading a textbook. He looked perfect, and when he glanced up at the noise and saw her there, gasping for breath within her eyes wild, he just gave a comforting smile. Everything all right, Lizzie? Of course it is. I just forgot a book I need for class. She swept up to him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders to give him a slow kiss. The sight of him had calmed her considerably, and Lizzie tried to keep the desperation out of the kiss. Yet this warm intimacy with him was what she needed. There was no sense giving him anything to worry about. Look at those loving photos. She had found him, her perfect person. Lizzie drew back slightly and rested her forehead against his, her heart filled with warmth and his melody strong in her mind once again. I love you, Lizzie. It made her heart flutter just as much as the first time he said it. I love you too, John. More than anything. Yes, I love you, Lizzie. But as happy as she was to reply, she sensed that something wasn't quite right. There was a bit of tension in his eyes. Was he carrying some weight? Depression? Had someone done something to him? No. Lizzie realized that wasn't it. He was looking at her with concern, having sensed some part of her neediness. It was wonderful that he was so attentive, but the idea that she could have caused him any pain broke her heart. Is there anything you want to talk about? Well, first I'm gonna make a save. Encourage him. Nope, sometimes I just miss you so much I have to stop by. Well, I never mind seeing you. I'm glad. You've been seeming kinda down lately. Let me know if there's anything I can do. You're already incredible, Lizzie. I'm glad to have you. Lizzie leaned in closer and kissed him again. I'll be back after class. Maybe tonight we'll both have some free time, okay? To do the old hentai. John smiled and kissed her back. The shadow in his eyes were gone, which made a new warmth flow through Lizzie's chest. Though she longed to stay, she knew that it was better to go to class. Maximizing time in the short term would only hinder their long-term objectives, and she wanted as much of him as she could possibly get. Lizzie headed to their bedroom and traded one spiral notebook for another, feeling a moment of guilt at the deception. But no, it was better this way. She could take the burn onto herself and leave his life lighter. Well, time to go kill the track team. She left with a kiss and a cheery wave, but then crept around the side of the apartment. She had left a little earlier than necessary to arrive in class on time for this very purpose. From the perfect angle, she could see him through the window, going back to his book, studying so seriously to help them have a better life together. Lizzie didn't try to hide the broad smile on her face, just spent a while watching him. There was less need to watch him now that they were together, but she still enjoyed it. Once she had been observed, and the other girl had made the despicable assumption that Lizzie was concerned that he would cheat on her, as if such a thing was possible, as if she needed any reason except to look at him. She did like to observe him sometimes to make sure he wasn't sad again. John's depression was mostly under control now that they had abandoned his awful Koitek medicine, but she knew it was a part of him that they needed to be watched. The thought of his inner sadness made Lizzie want to run back inside and kiss him again, forget class and just spend time making love until he looked only happy and relaxed. Reluctantly, Lizzie pulled herself away, chewing on one finger. John might be mentally healthy, but he still needed protection. Her mind flashed back to the track team and the other threats on campus. She would make sure that nothing could interfere with their love. She arrived just a little late, but it was a relaxed university and no one cared too much. Lizzie carefully set out her books and focused on the lesson. There were worse things in classes. If the universe declared that she couldn't spend every single moment with him, she needed something else to fill her time. With a few exceptions like psychology, classes weren't obnoxious at all. A few even provided knowledge that might have utility in the future. And all of it had some utility in getting them closer to the degrees. Once it had been difficult for Lizzie to think about such long-term plans, but now she could see how both of them earning degrees would help them create the life they wanted. But after that, things became more tangled in her mind. She wanted to be with him. She wanted whatever he wanted. But he was convinced that they should take jobs in the industry, play some small role in preventing pharmaceutical giants like Koitek from doing anything as terrible they had done at their old high school. Or the experience they had done at Lizzie's existence. The idea that John wanted to make sure there would be never anyone else like her. That she would be the only one. It made her tingle all over. She didn't think he would approve of that thought, but she liked it so much that she kept it to herself. But the idea of getting involved with Koitek again, even indirectly, still left her. She wanted what he wanted, of course. A life together. They would have that. No matter what they chose, it would be fine. For once, Lizzie set such thoughts aside and focused fully on class. After the lecture finished, Lizzie practically skipped out of the hall. It had been her last class of the day, and John had likely finished the work that he needed to do in the computer lab. That left them the rest of the day to themselves. So she wouldn't have to leave him again. Lizzie stopped by the store first, since they're low on food. Man, I'm hungry. It hurt her pride as a cook that they had to eat ramen. Ramen! But the money was tight. The least she could do was purchase cheap vegetables and enhance the experience. As she picked out appropriate ones, Lizzie carefully kept track of her spending versus the amount of money she had left. She had aged out of child support. Not that the man who had impregnated her mother had ever been reliable, which combined with college expenses left her in a more difficult financial situation than ever before in her life. She was careful to add everything up in her head so that she still had enough money to drop by the pharmacy after getting their groceries. There was a small, locally owned one where she felt comfortable getting John's depression medication that would seem to be getting more expensive these days. Of course, she did still own Abby's home in their hometown, but Lizzie wanted to avoid anything to do with it in case Koitek was watching, and John would never want to live there anyways. Perhaps after they graduated, she could sell the house for a down payment on one of their own. The idea gave her a pleasant hum of emotions as she finished her errands and headed back home, still with a spring in her step. But when Lizzie arrived, she found the door locked. She quickly pulled out her key and adding another scratch marked the lock before successfully opening it. The apartment was empty, briefly making her heart hammer in her chest. There was a note on the table, and she seized it, eyes flickering over the words. John had gone to the computer lab and said he'd hoped to be back before she was, but that it might be longer, so she had an explanation. But even as Lizzie breathed a sigh of relief, part of her mind began to turn over other thoughts. What if this was some kind of excuse? It's a no-good track team, isn't it? I should have killed them when I had the chance. No, John would never do such a thing. Never. Lizzie crumpled the paper in her hands, then nervously tried to smooth it out again. John would never betray her. She knew that now, carried that fact tightly in her heart. But the world was filled with awful people, terrible women who might try to seduce him, and even if he pushed them away, the idea of one of them laying a hand on him. What if Koitek got a hold of him somehow? They'd already tried it once, to use him to get to her. She thought they were safe now, but what if she was wrong? Once, Lizzie might have flown out the door and hunted him down until she could be sure that he was safe. Now she found herself pacing, fingers tangling in her hair as she tried to quiet the thoughts screaming in her head. On a whim, Lizzie grabbed the extra spell notebook she'd taken and slapped it down on the table. She began furiously writing everything in her head, letting the thoughts out to give herself a slight little relief. She'd done this once, before she had met him, just like she collected pictures of him. Now that she had the real thing, she neglected such habits, but they had helped her once. Perhaps they could again. Finally, she was done. Lizzie took a deep breath and looked over the page of furious scribbling. Some of the thoughts there embarrassed her. She needed to trust him utterly, but it was good to let them out of her head and onto paper. She felt calm again, and the memory wafted through the deep recesses of her soul. The place where she kept him, comforting her even now. Hear the music. Though the page was a mess, she had returned from the edge. Not today, track team. You escaped today. Lizzie realized that she was gripping a knife in her other hand. After a pause, she set it down. Calm down, old Sparky. You'll get your blood yet. Though her mind was clear, she still wasn't sure what to do. Obviously, John would never cheat on her. He had been very considerate to leave a note, and no doubt that explained the situation. It was also unlikely that anything terrible had happened to him. She still missed him, though, and wanted to drown the rest of her fears in his presence. It was possible that he would be unhappy if his work had gone on too long, and might be happy to see her. Lizzie closed the notebook and put it with her others, considering what she would do. Whoa, the mouse cursor was moving really fast. Nope, yeah. Come on. Well then, can't disagree with that, mouse cursor. Realizing she had prior priorities, Lizzie set about considering her options. The track team was definitely the place to start, but she needed to consider her options carefully. So we murder them one by one. We lure them with what do kids like nowadays? I know, guava pastries and almonds. And anime. We'll lure them in with almonds and anime and guava pastries, and pick them off one by one. This plan would never fail. Make her way to the track. Lizzie reconsidered the situation rationally. Nope. Obviously the entire track team was guilty, and some of them might be suspicious, but wouldn't be able to touch John. The best way through this was via targeted strikes. Ha! So I wasn't too far off. We just need to see guava pastry, and I'm dead on my predictions. After watching for long enough, Lizzie knew exactly who she needed to remove. There was an attractive blonde girl who stretched unnecessarily between runs to show off her assets, and her eyes wandered. Yes, it would be best to start with her. It would have been immensely satisfying to isolate her and take care of her directly, ideally with an axe in hand, but that would be difficult to hide, and she needed to preserve their life together. For several days, Lizzie skipped some of her classes, watching the girl's schedule. She had a car she kept in the east parking lot and frequently drove out of town. It seemed she wasn't a particularly careful driver and didn't wear a seatbelt either, so it'd be easy to set everything up. You're gonna mess up the brakes. The only problem with cutting our brake lines was that the girl would know us while backing out. That wouldn't do at all. Slow release tires. While considering this problem, Lizzie acquired gloves, checked for cameras, and made other preparations. Lizzie, is everything okay? Lizzie abruptly realized she had been scribbling her plans at home in front of him. John didn't look suspicious because he trusted her, but he knew something was wrong. Lizzie? What's that scribbling of how to murder 20 people and get away with it you're writing? You're not thinking about murdering 20 people and trying to get away with it, are you? She felt a surge of love that he knew her so well. Oh, John, you know me so well. You know, for the fact that I might be thinking about killing 20 people. That's just so romantic. But she realized that she had made a mistake letting him see. She had to hide everything deep inside her, at least until she could remove the problem. Everything's fine, John. There have just been some mean girls in class who have been really upset me lately. I see. You can always talk to me, Lizzie. You know that, right? Of course. But she couldn't talk to him about this. Not about that horrible girl. No, she needed to take care of this herself, to protect them. Lizzie gave John her sweetest smile. She could be stronger than this. Swallow the stress and show him only all the love she had to offer. Then he wouldn't be sad and she could eliminate the problem and they would have a happy college days together. Yes, John would love me after I murdered that complete track team. A week later, she had her opportunity. A sporting event filled the eastern parking lot, making her target park on a side street where there would be no need to brake. Lizzie hummed romantically to herself as she drained the brake fluid, disabled the emergency brake, and manipulated the pedal until it felt natural. Committing murder. Gonna kill that girl. Then she retreated a safe distance and watched as everything went according to plan. The crash was less dramatic than she expected, but it was enough. She was certain of it, even though she had to restrain herself from going to check. Because that might have cast suspicion on her, and she couldn't let anything ruin their relationship. But things were better now. A terrible girl was gone, and John wouldn't notice anything. And she could love him forever. Now there was nothing left to do but make happy college memories. What a wonderful ending. Okay. So, let's not click the kill track team one anymore. Let's click let it go. Let it go. Be the girl that John wants you to let go. There we go. Lizzie gripped her forehead with both hands, forcing the thought away. She didn't need to do that anymore. The hollowness within her grew and grew as she left campus. Fortunately, their little apartment was nearby. A split home provided as housing for couples. It had taken serious work to obtain one despite not being married, as the fool's admissions thought there was a chance she and John might break up. Since it was 2:52, John was likely to be ready for class. He had referenced the paper being due soon, but he never went down to a computer lab until she was in class. After all, he knew that she might need him. So when dialogue is the same due to choices, I will skip them, and basically the dialogue after the previous choice was all the same, so I just skipped ahead to the next major choice. Explain fully. Well, there was this couple. She explained the encounter, hesitating a moment to give him her full thoughts, but eventually sharing. As expected, he wasn't disturbed by her fears and didn't tell her that she was wrong. John had been through too much with her after all. You think it was nothing unusual? Judging from what you said. Judging from what you said, they just sound lonely to me. They probably just want to find people they have something in common with. Then again, remember how that whole conspiracy kicked up last time? Maybe. But even if that's true, I still don't want them anywhere near us. They're probably stupid, evil people, John. They probably like games we don't like. And movies we don't like. Evil people, John, and they probably like anime too. All we need is the two of us. He smiled ruefully, but there was real affection in his expression too. John pulled her into a quick embrace and squeezed her tight. If that's how you feel, we don't need to interact with other people. I kind of want to just keep my head down and graduate anyways. I agree. She cuddled with him for a moment longer, nestling her head against his chest, then reluctantly pulled back, watching her hair as it clung to him. Though she longed to stay, she knew that it was better to go to class. Maximizing time in the short term would only hinder their long-term objectives, and she wanted as much of him as she could possibly get. So I skipped ahead again. Basically, it was the same scenes as the route I had with the bad ending, and this is where she comes back and John is not there, and there's a note. So let's start making dinner. I feel like meeting him in the computer lab might go wrong. It made her anxious not to take action, but Lizzie kept herself from leaving. Instead, she set about making dinner, trying not to watch the door or listen too closely for his arrival. Lizzie set about cutting up the vegetables, removing the bad portions and reducing the rest to appetizing chunks. Her knife flickered satisfyingly, perfectly balanced for her hand. Lizzie's very good with knives. They might need to make do in many ways, but she had excellent kitchen knives to work with. Yes, many. Even when money was tight, he had never suggested selling her knife collection. She would have, though. Would have gladly sold every knife and every single thing she owned for his sake. Knife still flying, Lizzie frowned to herself. No, that wasn't right. She'd need her axe and a few knives to defend him properly. Plus, John wouldn't want her to give up everything like that. Considering such warm thoughts, Lizzie flipped her knife around her hand a few unnecessary times as she finished cutting. Not the kind of thing she could do in public, but at home there was no one to see her but John, and he wouldn't be afraid of her. It might be too early to cook anything, so Lizzie set the chopped vegetables aside and converted the rest into a salad. She smiled to herself, but realized that she was out of preparations. Her gaze wandered toward the door. Fortunately, at that very moment, she heard his footsteps outside. Lizzie was torn between rushing to greet him and waiting by her work, which made her hesitate long enough for him to enter. Sorry, I got held back. That's no problem at all. I've gotten things ready for dinner. Looks like you've been busy. I'm really hungry, so is eating early fine? Of course. Since she'd done her preparations already, Lizzie just set the water on to boil and added a few other flourishes. John set the table and she beamed at him, happy to be working together. Eventually, they both sat down together on opposite sides of their small table. It was nothing much, but it was theirs, and that was wonderful. She would have been happy just to watch him eat, but she knew that he'd love to talk to her even more. The idea that he wanted her to open up herself up to him, even her darkest thoughts, always made her happy. But for today, she had nothing particularly dark on her mind. So, you imply that you got held up in the lab. Mostly it was nothing unusual. Just had to answer some questions. But Dan caught me at the end. Wanted me to switch shifts at the library. He wanted me to do tonight, which I said wouldn't work. So we had to do some weird rescheduling. Has it been happening a lot lately? Yeah, and I might be picking up even more shifts. Figure you can't hurt, right? No, but she didn't like him to be away from home more often. Lizzie had to admit that the library job was a good one, allowing him to study or read most of the time, but she still didn't like it. At least she could visit him without it being a hindrance. Why did he feel the need to work so much so? Lizzie had her own campus job, and the numbers of their debt weren't too awful thanks to scholarships. Would it be better if they could get rid of it? Maybe she should consider going back to the house and selling it after all. Though she considered asking him all those questions, Lizzie decided to hold back. John had many concerns of his own, and adding her anxiety to those might make him depressed again. She was stronger, so it was better for her to shoulder the burden. After dinner, they moved to the couch to work. It was a ratty old thing they'd gotten off a curb, but was fairly soft and it served to hold them. They sat on opposite sides, each with their textbooks, their feet touching in between. Just being able to be so near him, so comfortably. Lizzie slid her feet against his leg and gave him a bright smile when he looked up at her. An old part of her wanted to act immediately, to have sex before the moment could pass, but they had been together for 2 years, and moments like this were hardly a rare thing. Slowly her mind had learned that she didn't need to be desperate. The life she wanted with him was filled with moments like this too. Yes, moments full of long monologues. Despite her thoughts circling around him, Lizzie finished her work rather quickly. Because of it, in a sense, there was a purpose to so many activities that had once been just going through the motions. Lizzie saw he was still busy working and spent a little while admiring him. She loved that look of concentration as he became fully absorbed with something. It was even better when it was directly toward her. But just his concentration was cute too. She could have watched forever, but once she got her fill, Lizzie stood up. She kissed him on the cheek and then headed to the other side of their apartment. It didn't have a lot of space, but there was enough for her to retrieve her axe from the cupboard and experiment with it a little. She hadn't experienced any more physical instability since the incident, leaving her very capable of protecting him, but she needed to be cautious. She also considered making an axe spun, but felt that was ill-timed and wouldn't be funny at the moment. Maybe later when she actually has to use it for violent reasons. Though she did like to think about it, Lizzie had to admit that there was a small chance she could hurt John by accident. Even if they never had a serious conflict with Koitek again, she needed her knives to feel secure. The idea that she might cause a slight injury by accident. Lizzie practiced carefully, both falling through with all the force she could muster and bringing the axe to a halt at a moment's notice. The practice was smoothing, and Lizzie soon found herself smiling. There had been a time in her life, after she found him, when it had been possible that she might harm him. In order to preserve their love, though those thoughts now struck her as alien and horrible, she would never hurt him. Never. But that meant she needed to be always prepared. When Lizzie finished, she discovered that John was watching her. She had no doubt that her expression was far from inviting, as she had been imagining cutting down threats to them. But he was watching her fondly. Lizzie beamed at him and returned her axe to its place. This is not the exact time to be using this anyway. Are you done studying? For tonight, yeah. There's no point doing more, since I can read at work tomorrow. Then, she drifted closer to him, smile broadening as she pored over his face. He wasn't too tired. He made a point of saying his work was done, and though he had been watching her with gentle affection, she knew there was more there. Chicka-bum-bum, chicka-bum-bow-wow. Lizzie eagerly slid down into his lap, her body pressing up against his. Soon she could feel the proof of his desire in his pants, and she cooed happily. But though he put his arms around her waist, his eyes still watched her carefully. I know you need to get up early tomorrow, in more ways than one. Do you want to? Whoa, no, mouse cursor, calm down. I see you want a specific thing? Well, can't disagree with that, mouse cursor. Grinning, Lizzie leaned in closer and kissed him. There had been so many small kisses throughout the day, each adding a little warmth inside her. And now she returned it all, kissing him deeply and passionately, as Melanie decided to skip the scene due to censorship. His hands tied on her waist, holding her a little closer. Most of the hesitance and uncertainty were gone now, since they were familiar with each other's bodies. She had never had trouble needing him too much to be hesitant, but John moved more slowly. It sent a thrill through her every time he touched her confidently. Lizzie bent closer to him, and there was a loud knock on the door. Her eyes narrowed to slits and she glared murder toward the entrance. I'm gonna murder you. You enter my sexy time. I'm gonna eat you alive. We don't have to answer. Another knock, louder. No, ignoring it was not an option. Lizzie sprang up from his lap and wrenched open the door. What kind of generic guy interrupts my time? It's like, oh, hi! It's a little contrast to what's going on in her head right now. The boy on the other side was someone she recognized from one of John's classes. John said he was intelligent and Lizzie didn't find him annoying, so under normal circumstances he was fine. At the moment she felt only rage toward him, barely contained within her smile. He was physically fit but no threat. Her axe could be in her hand before... Hey Aaron, what's up? You guys want to check the news. Franciscus Kelsey's gonna... Seriously, just do it. It took Lizzie an anxious moment to identify the name. A public figure, not someone they knew. Related to the pharmaceutical industry. Not immediate threat, but an annoyance at this moment. The news seemed to matter to John, so he had to turn on the salvage TV in the corner. Lizzie reluctantly acknowledged that Aaron was going to be an entity in their life, at least for a little while, and allowed him to step inside. You live today, but just for today. After flipping to the right channel, John watched carefully as the news reports ran. Aaron slouched against a nearby wall, leaving Lizzie to hover behind John. When she heard Koitek's name, she began to pay full attention, soaking up the information. The study they're talking about. What did we miss? They didn't go into detail, but something about how sloppy pharmaceutical experiments used to be. A whole town of people got sick. Bad stuff. Lizzie's heart began beating rapidly. Was it possible that the report mentioned her? No, not her specifically. There were privacy concerns, but it might have referenced her experiment. Lizzie's fingers began twitching at her sides, which drew John's attention. He frowned a little, then returned to Aaron. How many cases did they talk about? Anything involving specific individuals? Just general information I heard. Why? Exactly a question Lizzie had been afraid of, but John didn't seem disturbed. I used to be part of a Paxton trial that didn't go well. At least for me, I was wondering if they got mentioned. Oh, is that how you got clued into all this? Behind them, Lizzie let her fingers slowly relax. John had been thinking of her, hadn't exposed her to any unnecessary intention. Of course he would. She was awful for doubting him. While she was feeling a warm glow, she missed John's response. Well, anyway, they only emphasized the biggest cases. Kelsey's trying to prove that the harms are large enough that government policy needs to change. So that was how it connected. Francesca Kelsey was a researcher who used to work for the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Administration, but left as part of a protest. She had been campaigning for increased powers to regulate pharmaceutical megacorporations since then, especially ones of private armies and super soldiers. Lizzie usually didn't have many opinions about politics, but she approved in the case if it did damage to Koitek. And most likely would stem any future issues when it eventually becomes some kind of not umbrella corporation that makes an army of zombies. She had never seen the woman herself, though. Lizzie watched curiously until the news station played a clip of Francesca speaking about the report, then began chewing on one knuckle. Though Francesca appeared serious and dressed professionally, she was too young for Lizzie's taste. Maybe it was fine for John to pay attention to her since she was doing important work related to both of them, but his attention focusing on anyone else made Lizzie anxious. This is good to know. But why'd you run over here? The congressional debates are going to take forever. Oh, that wasn't the urgent part. They said it earlier. Kelsey's going on a speaking tour trying to raise awareness of the issue. But not all the locations are set. We need to get her on campus, man. Ah, I get it. I don't know how much help we can be, though. Plus, Lizzie's probably going to murder her in some kind of jealous rage. One time she tried to murder Mickey Mouse when I was watching the Disney Channel. Didn't work out too well when I explained she didn't exist, but you know, she tried. Well, and I wanted to ask you if you'd join again. We need more people to lead this if we're going to gain any momentum. John hesitated, looking towards her. His mouth had opened slightly as if to ask something, but he saw the tension in her eyes. Aaron looked back too, but Lizzie had pulled her finger from her mouth and he couldn't see past her smile. It's going to be hard for us to commit to that, I think. But keep us informed of what happens, alright? Alright, I won't press. I'm gonna get Kelsey here, though. Surely we're a big enough campus. Well, John made small talk and walked Aaron out. Lizzie stayed in front of the television and kept watching the broadcast. Koitek had tried to take John away from her. She had feared 1,000 things, and many times he had calmed her fears, but back then, she had been absolutely right. An intellectual part of her knew that it was a huge corporation, manufacturing many common drugs. Not all of them were as ill-advised as Paxatine. Not every experiment was harmful, and not every employee could be as terrible as Miss Smith. I feel like when you're making super Yandere soldiers, it's a pretty big concern, even if it's only a percentage of the company. You know, like I said, going back to the Umbrella Corporation comparison, I'm sure the zombie making was only a subsection of Umbrella, but you know, it was the most devastating one. It didn't matter. Lizzie hated all of them. But she couldn't hack apart the entire corporation. Oh, you'll see. So she had no choice but to hope that something could be done. That was why she didn't mind people like Aaron so much. They could be useful. Maybe even this Francesca. But that didn't mean Lizzie wanted her to come here. Especially since she might bring attention from Koitek. Was this what she had been fearing? That was why they couldn't get married. Now with an event like this looming in the future, not while something could go wrong. All too soon, the broadcast moved on to other subjects. Though the pharmaceutical giants were becoming increasingly important in everyday life, they were still usually ignored compared to the banal celebrity news. Lizzie didn't care about that, since random foolish celebrities wouldn't attract John's eye. She still moved to turn the television off, though. When she turned back, she discovered John watching her with concern. She had been aware that Aaron had left, of course. But that was at the periphery of her thoughts. Only now did she reflect on the amount of time that had passed. Are you worried about it? I'm just afraid something will happen. Kotek will be watching. John approached and wrapped his arms around her. Lizzie eagerly let herself rest against his chest. Maybe, but everyone will be watching. Francesca Kelsey is one of their main political opponents, so they have to know anything around her will be scrutinized. Even if Aaron gets her to come, I'm sure it will pass without incident. That was logical. It was probably true. And though Lizzie cut and recut his sentence a dozen different ways, she didn't discern any real affection when he spoke the other woman's name. She was just a political figure working on an important cause, no more. She wasn't the threat. That dang Minnie Mouse is the threat. And Mickey, too. I'll get them one of these days. I know, but the reminder has me feeling so stressed. Understand. Let's just get some sleep, okay? Too late. Lizzie realized she had worked against herself. Though she felt anxious and twitchy now. If he had initiated again, she would have happily welcomed it. Sex would have let her take her mind off everything else for a time. But now he would just worry that she was only doing it for his sake. And as much as she tried to convince him otherwise, it might trouble him, and that always made things less enjoyable. Accepting the way things had gone, Lizzie smiled warmly at him and pulled them both toward the bedroom. Please hold me until I fall asleep. As they lay together, Lizzie curled up against his side. She began to feel calm again. Being near him always generated deep warmth within her, and just lying in his arms like this was a peaceful bliss. Maybe John had been right not to have sex that night. Her love for him was selfless, but she wasn't as perfect as he deserved. Sometimes her mind wouldn't cooperate, or her past got in the way. What she needed most now was to lie there with him, together. For her, it was just another glorious element of their life together, and as John stroked her hair affectionately, she reminded herself that he was happy just to be like this as well. Smiling, Lizzie drifted to sleep,